listeners, remember, Monday is Malaria Day. That's right, time to take that big orange pill and get ready for the Ho Chi Minh two-step.
This is a project that was 4.5 years in the works before it actually got to filming. Somebody brought me in a 2-page treatment about a guy named Adrian Cronauer. He was the first guy to play rock and roll on Armed Forces Radio Network as a disc jockey.
They didn't give me very much. There wasn't really very much about this idea. And in fact, I remember telling Larry, I said, look, you know, I really can't get hemmed into some story here that you have. I need to know all your preconceptions about this thing. Just tell me what you absolutely need to have, and I will go and I'll write a script. He said, okay. He said, disc jockey, Vietnam, and a girl. A romantic thing with a girl. I said, is that, and a brother. Her brother is like a Viet Cong, something like that. And I said, I have it.
Aaron Cronauer?
You got it.
Welcome to Saigon, sir.
Yeah, you can put an eye out with that.
I like the idea of a serviceman in Vietnam, pre the, you know, really the real explosive period.
When I got there, Saigon was still a sleepy little French colonial town. But by the time I left, it was a nightmare with this massive influx of troops and equipment and money. By the time I left, the economy was in ruins, the traffic was unmanageable, the black market was flourishing. But it was an interesting experience to see all this happen within just 1 year's time.
I don't think you can think of any movie about Vietnam that actually showed Vietnamese people. It was just people and their behavior. And going to the movies and watching some kind of beach party film and sitting there, and it's written in 5 languages. I mean, just trying to get a sense of time. And this guy, who has a great sense of humor, and it's time and place. There's no great kind of like, you know, story. You're not working out in some, you know, heavily plotted piece. There are mechanics to it all. But it's really the behavior of him and the people, and how does it all work, and his friends around him.
One of the #1 questions that people ask is how much of that movie was real?
Well, I mean, you know, you can't do his life, you know, but you just take that idea and you can certainly play off of that, you know, which is what we did, you know. I mean, you know, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid is really hardly about what Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid really did. But, you know, it's a germ of an idea and an area to explore, you know, armed forces radio. At that time, Saigon seems worthwhile to work off of that. You're certainly not trying to be factual to his life per se.
There's a lot of Hollywood exaggeration and outright imagination. For example, none of the characters in the film are based on actual people for legal reasons like invasion of privacy or libel. Rather, they're all stereotypes. But as is true of any good stereotype, you name any character in the film and I could probably think of half a dozen people I met during my 4 years in the Air Force. Going through a quick list, let's see. Yes, I was a disc jockey in Vietnam. And in my lectures, I can usually get a laugh by stopping at that point and scratching my head as if to think, is there anything else that was real? Well, yeah. I did teach English during my off-duty time. No, I did not teach because I was trying to meet this particularly beautiful Vietnamese girl. At least not one particular beautiful Vietnamese girl. I was not in a Jeep that was blown up by the Viet Cong, and I did not get lost in the jungle trying to avoid being captured. I don't think I ever had any sergeant major try and get me killed. And I don't think I ever had a friend who was a Viet Cong. But then in Saigon in the mid-60s, you didn't go up to one of your Vietnamese acquaintances and say, hey, listen, you can tell me, are you really Viet Cong? Huh?
But that's movies, you know. I'm sure he wasn't quite, you know. It has to be, I mean, like John Updike said to me one time, he said, it's Hollywood after all.
What is a demilitarized zone? Sounds like something out of The Wizard of Oz.
Oh, no, don't go in there.
Oh-hee-oh, Ho Chi Minh.
I remember there was some article written before we even came out that said, you know, how can you make a movie that has humor dealing with Vietnam? And that's sort of that kind of short-sightedness that they don't really understand what you're trying to do.
Oh, I'll get you, my pretty.
Oh my God, it's the Wicked Witch of the North, it's Hanoi Hannah!
Now, little G.I., you and your little Tudu, too. Ah!
The idea of doing a comedy about Vietnam was never contemplated. It just was not a subject to be contemplated. the idea of doing a comedy about Vietnam was verboten.
I mean, World War II, there was actually comedies, during World War II and et cetera, that would find a way to deal with a certain amount of humor in the armed forces. So this was not to make fun of servicemen or whatever, but there's humor to be mined because of the characters and the relationships.
The film, as it progresses, there's a certain point in the film where things start to get dark.
Some people said, well, you can't write a comedy about Vietnam, and other people were saying, well, you can't write a story about you can't write a comedy that has bombings.
The executives, when it was at Paramount Studios at the time, took a look at it and said, no, it's got to be a comedy. It's got to be a comedy from beginning to end.
And I said, how can you have Vietnam without a bombing? I mean, that's a big leap, And well, they said Larry fought it out with them, and to Larry's credit, he said, we're not taking it out.
So it went from 3 studios, all of whom said, we will not make this picture, finally to Disney and Jeff Katzenberg, who said, I think we can make this film.
When I read the script, I said, this is going to work. It's the right vehicle for Robin Williams. And with it had the right package. Barry Levinson was the right director for this material. This does not mean that someone else couldn't have made the movie and it would have been successful. It would have been this movie. But Robin and Barry were the right people for this material.
The real comedy happens in this movie is like when you're seeing Robin Williams on the air. And watching Robin Williams on the air, you can see how funny he is, and this is him improvising the scene. I mean, we gave him pages to work on to start off with. He took a look at the pages. He said, let me just try something of my own. He then proceeded to do endless improvisation.
This is rock and roll. Time to rock it from the Delta to the DMZ. Is that me, or does that sound like an Elvis Presley movie? Viva Da Nang. Oh, viva Da Nang. Da Nang me, why don't they get a rope and hang me?
Robin is very distinctly an American comedian. Good Morning Vietnam is very much told from an American perspective. And the humor is very American. So there are jokes about Lyndon Johnson's daughters and things like that. So when we were in the control room shooting Robin's comic riffs, Robin, like a lot of comics, needs some sort of feedback, needs to hear the laughter and know that the audience is going with him. And we had an all-British and Thai crew. So Robin would do some stuff that was just hilarious. And Levinson and I would be, fighting from cracking up. But the crew would just sit there afterwards, just stone-faced, not a thing. All right, let's move on to the next shot and we'll do this, whatever. And poor Robin thought he was bombing on a daily basis. He just thought, oh, this isn't working at all. I thought it was good stuff, but it's not.
Barry really was one of the few directors who really understood Robin in terms of improvisation, where to let him go and where to make sure he stuck with the script. And as soon as he was in a situation where he was a disc jockey playing those rock and roll tunes, and Barry just let him go free. And Robin can go on for 25 minutes at a shot with no problem.
And he could go.
The Mississippi River broke through a protective dike today. What is a protective dike? Is that a large woman standing by the river going, don't go near there?
But Betty,
Don't go near there. Get away from the river. Stay away from there. I know we can't use the word dyke. You can't even say lesbian. It's women in comfortable shoes. Thank you very much.
The only reason it would stop is because the camera ran out. Robin doesn't run out. And he could just go and go and go and go and go and go.
But that only amounts to 12 minutes of the film. You know what I mean? That's all. 12 or 14, I think it's something. I think we once went to check that. But it's so little of the movie.
But I hear that there's a phenomenal amount of Robin Williams outtakes, and that would probably are good enough for another movie somewhere.
A lot of Barry's movies have quite a bit of improvisation in them, and he does it great. I was afraid sometimes when I was there because I would, and in fact, it was the first movie that I had done, and sometimes I would sit there and say, well, he's trying that joke, and it's like he's just got it, he's just like figured this joke out now. I worked on this over the joke here for like 2 years. I worked on that sentence for like 9 months. Try that one first.
You just try to find things that would, follow what is the essence of the script.
Barry does that a lot. He says, just do it. Don't tell me, just do it. And in fact, and he let us expand on the material. Now, to be fair to Mitch Markowitz, the script is, pretty much there. I think we pretty much always did what was in the script. For example, my character, Drywitz, had a riff about Joey Bishop, if I remember properly. And he says, hey, can somebody explain Joey Bishop to me? I just don't get that one. And I felt that it wasn't complete, the thought, and then I added the line.
Don't get me wrong, he seems like a nice guy, but my father's a nice guy, and he's not funny either.
So that's how it's, I just expanded on that. And again, I left it so, as long as you're doing the original material, it lets Barry edit it out if he wants, but he kept a lot of it in.
And I'd done tons of research. I'd met with people who'd been in Vietnam, and I'd gotten all this information I could about what it was like to be there. And I was working on the script with Dad. My dad's a wonderful character actor. His name is Bruce Kirby. I think my dad has a kind of genius at times where he can give you a hook which will make things incredibly clear to you as an actor. And he was talking, and I was listening. I was talking, he was listening, going back and forth. But nothing was really clicking with me, which was no comment on him. It was just me. And we said goodbye, and as I was getting up to go to the door, because I was going to get on the plane the next day to take off, he said, Bruno, one more thing. I said, yeah, what is that? He said, this is the kind of guy who writes jokes and then sends them into Reader's Digest.
Reader's Digest is considering publishing 2 of my jokes.
Really?
And when he said that, I knew exactly who this character was. That line eventually got into the movie because of him. But I knew exactly who this guy was. I knew who he was when you didn't see him on screen, and I knew who he was when he was alone.
One of the things that was so much fun is in all the classroom sequences, because they really couldn't do, the lines in the script. And so you have 2 things: either really kind of work it over and over again, trying to get them to say the line, or just say, let's just forget it. Let's just forget that whole thing. We cannot ultimately pull it off. And then, so what I would do for that sequence is we would not even slate the film. We would just turn the camera on, and then I would be talking to one, of the students in the scene, and then maybe Robin would start, and then out of that, they would be getting involved, and then we would just, and after we would almost, be ready to run out, then all of a sudden we put up a slate, and we would slate it on the tail slate.
Groovy, yeah, say that. Groovy. Yes! Baby! If something's really nice, you say it's groovy. Doesn't mean you're like going like, oh, no, it means groovy. Try that one. Say, hey, baby, what's happening? Let's groove. Hey, baby, what's happening? Let's groove.
And so that's what we did for all of the stuff. So basically, they were really talking and being just involved in what was going on at the time, between one another or between, Robin and them. So that's all very natural. It's just what happened.
Okay, if someone is making you angrier and angrier, therefore you have...
Piss me off! Piss me off!
That's their own personality. Same thing when we did the softball game. There's a great little moment, and I can't remember his name anymore, unfortunately. It's so long ago. And he was the pitcher, and we had these melons and things. And he came up to me, he says, I have seen a real, a softball with my own eyes, And he says, and this is not, there's a problem about the size of it or whatever. And so what I said to him was, I'm not in charge of the equipment. So here, he says, well, then what should I do? I said, Robin is in charge of the equipment. You got to go talk to Robin. He says, yes, then I will do that. He was very proper in a way. And I basically wandered over to Robin very quickly and just said, he's going to come over. He's got a problem with with the melons and everything. You're going to have to deal with it, And he looked at me or whatever, and then he came over, and we just had the cameras wander over, and then we just filmed it. And what he's explaining to him is what he was trying to tell me.
A real baseball is much smaller and harder than this one.
You got me there, Wilk, because I'm sorry, we have no budget, you see, and I got to get on a plane, and we have to do with what we can. Give me your hand.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you all the same.
Thank you all the same. And what, you want to take the ball?
No.
Okay. We got to play, Wilk. You're pitching.
I'm returning the ball to the original place.
That's just him having a problem with that and the size of it and how to use it. That's not part of, what the text is. He had a problem with that, and so that's all that is. And the confusion of running between first base and all this kind of confusion that was going on with them in that softball game thing is that I didn't want to explain how to play the game. And we had two of the MPs that were supposed to take Robin to leave. And I said, look, if they're running the wrong direction or something, then you can just go over and then, get into that. And so that's the way we filmed it. So it was just completely chaotic. So all the confusion that was going on and the laughing and all that stuff is just grabbing the moments and putting it together. And we would go out every afternoon at a certain time to continue to play the game. And that's how it was put together. So it gets as much of their own personalities as possible into the, into the scene.
Besides the comedy, the thing that we were trying to impress was the truth of Adrian Cronauer was that he was playing those Jim Morrison songs and those songs that weren't weren't appropriate for guys in the Army. At least they thought so at the time. But this was a rock and roll war.
We're going to play some music for you right now. Here we go. Here's a little James Brown coming your way. Baby, help me, please.
Armed Forces Radio was there as a morale factor for the American troops. We had done some surveys, and to no one's great surprise, we found out most of our listeners were young men in their late teens and early 20s. But also, we found out that very few had ever been outside the United States before. Many had never been outside their own hometown. And the military had come along and quite literally had picked them up, took them halfway around the world and dumped them into a totally alien environment. And not surprisingly, culture shock would set in with a vengeance. And it was our job, as they like to say in the military, our mission. It was our mission to be an antidote to this homesickness. And we figured the best way to do that was to sound as much as possible like a stateside radio station.
I don't think he knew it at the time, but he was a breakthrough disc jockey who said, this is a rock and roll war. And I'm going to play rock and roll for these troops because this is what they can relate to. And if we want to build up morale and if we want them to listen to the radio, let's play the music they're going to listen to.
Jesus, that guy's as boring as whale shit. Not really. See, the purpose is to inform you as to the radius of the radio waves.
Mantovani? They play Mantovani to insomniacs who don't respond to strong drugs.
I tried to expand the amount of top 40 music because that was what most of our listeners wanted to hear.
Requests will be taken pretty soon. Requests? Where am I going to take requests? Where can you call from? Yeah, I'm in a phone booth out in the DMZ. I'm trying to call you right now.
But we were on the cusp of a lot of kinds of music. There were the Beatles, very popular at the time. The Stones hadn't quite reached popularity yet. There was a lot of country music, Johnny Cash and Patsy Cline. There was soul music and Motown. The Supremes were just getting cranked up. There was the Mersey Beat, Petula Clark, and some of the other bubblegum music groups from England, Herman's Hermits, and that sort. There was all kinds of things going on in music during those days. And it was a great time to be a DJ and to be programming.
Today. Hi, what's your name? My name's Bob Fibber. Bob, what do? I'm in artillery. Thank you, Bob. Can we play anything for you? Anything! Just play it loud, okay?
I didn't really know rock and roll music even all that well because I'm a classical violinist. And I had the problem of, I knew a couple of things, and it was also a bit before my time. So I didn't really know that. I knew like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and stuff like that. I didn't really know the stuff from 10 years before that or 8 years before that. So I think there were a few times where he says, and now, a certain, so-and-so song, and I guess that's in. But Barry, was, the music was a bit of genius in this movie. It really made a huge impact on it. And Barry knows a lot of music. He knows like a lot of rock and roll and stuff like that, and like really obscure stuff, and he really used it. He made these songs more famous than they were when they were famous,
I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them and blue for me and you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
It's a kind of a fluke. I love that song for a long time, and you forgot about it. But one day when I'm riding to the set in Thailand, the song's on the radio, and I'm listening to it. And as soon as it comes up, it's like all these images are flashing in my head, So when I got to the set, I said, look, here's what we need to do. We need to get a student riot, blowing up some kind of like village, etc. This. I was just rattling these things off. So what is this for? I said, and get the song "What a Wonderful World" by Louis Armstrong, and that'll be the montage that we're supposed to do, because there was a montage that's said in the movie. We need it. But all these images flashed in my head.
They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than I never knew. And I think to myself.
And I said, Alan Mason, who I've used for years as music supervisor, I said, Alan, the song is so great. And he said, well, we're about a year and a half off. I think we were 65 or 66, and I was like, 67 or something like that. And I said, there's got to be one of these times when you got to take the liberty when you say, this works so well that the fact that we're like a year or a year and a half doesn't matter. And so I'm normally very strict with that. I said, but I don't know how it can happen any better than this. This seems so perfect. Let's just go, that's it. We're just going to do it that way.
Good morning, Vietnam!
That shout started when I was in Greece doing the morning show there. And it started off as a calm, matter-of-fact, good morning, Heraklion, because I was at Heraklion Air Station. But as the program developed and got wilder and wilder, the good morning, Heraklion got wilder and wilder. When I went to Vietnam, my first couple of months, I was the news director, which is why I got involved in some of the problems of censorship. But then the fellow who did the morning show was leaving, and I was slated to take over, so I took what I had been doing in Greece and pretty much transplanted it to Saigon. And Good Morning Heraklion became Good Morning Vietnam. The one thing that really was wrong about the movie was the way Robin did the sign-on. Because what he did was just a rising crescendo of Good Morning Vietnam, and that's not the way it was really done. In reality, you stress the word good for a very practical reason, because if you're a morning man, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. You are going to oversleep. And when that happens, you come tearing into the station at the very last minute, and you're staggering around half asleep, half dressed, and you don't have any records pulled, and you don't know where your headphones are, and you haven't put in your contact lenses, and no tapes are set up. And as you walk through the studio, you hear the newsman saying, "That's the latest from the Armed Forces Radio Newsroom. Next news in 1 hour." Now you got to do something. So as you try and pull some records and find your headphones and get everything set up, you turn on the microphone and you say, But that shout became pretty well known. And I found that it wasn't always well received. Sometimes on particularly bad days, it was not unknown for some of the troops, when I'd yell, "Good morning, Vietnam," they would turn to their radios, yell the GI equivalent of "Get stuffed, Kronauer." And on one occasion I heard of, a guy picked up his M1 and blew away his radio. Nonetheless, when I left Vietnam, the fellow who took up the morning show from me kept that shout and continued it throughout his tour. An Army specialist by the name of Kramer Haas was his name. And it became a tradition with just about every morning man thereafter. So sometimes at a veterans reunion now, a man will walk up to me and say, "I used to listen to you every morning." "Oh, really? When were you there?" Oh, I was there in 69, 70. You see, I started that in 65, 66. But what they remember is that shout.
We used Bangkok, Thailand as Saigon. We had to change all the street signs. Everything had to be made Vietnamese. The outfits had to be different. The thing that really tied the city up was the fact that the traffic is on the other side of the street going in certain directions, like the difference between here and England, for example.
So in order to do that scene at the beginning of the movie, when all of these cars are all riding around and everything else, we have to change over from either it's the right side to the left side, or I don't remember. The steering wheel would have been on the right, it's now on the left. I can't remember which is which anymore. But it was the opposite. So when you see all these cars, we had to reset up the traffic in a city that's amazingly congested.
I mean, incredible traffic. And you'd see 5 people on a motorcycle. You'd see a family of 5 on a motorcycle. You'd see a mother, a father, 2 kids hanging on the back, and they'd have one up front. Amazing traffic jams.
We were shooting in an enormous intersection that actually 8 major streets lead into, going into a boulevard that goes down to the Royal Palace. We were doing a scene in which we had about 600 extras, 150 vehicles, many of which we had made. We closed all of the streets and the intersection, reversed the traffic, because in Thailand everybody drives on the left-hand side of the road, and we were finally making our shot, which had taken probably 2.5 hours to set up, for a shot that's going to last maybe 30 seconds on the screen. In the middle of it, the police all of a sudden snapped to attention and ushered us out of the camera positions, made all of our vehicles come off the boulevard, and sure enough, a royal procession. We had the prince with all of the police cars and the follow cars, and they all had to come by. We all had to get off the streets. Those of us who were wearing shorts were not allowed to be in its sight. And it took us an hour to regroup and get ready to make the shot again, and sure enough, one of the princesses came through. That happened 3 times. It's not the sort of thing that you expect.
You know, in the end, nobody's going to care. It's like you're spending a lot of time and effort because you're going to have to get that to be correct, and no one will care about it, but it's just in there.
I much prefer location shooting because, one, it allows me, selfishly, it allows me to go to travel and explore someplace I don't know, but also, quite frankly, it gives the movie a real verisimilitude. It just seems like it's actually taking place different from the artifice of a Hollywood studio. And sometimes it's nothing more than being able to look out the window and see the real thing behind you.
This is really funny. They put us in this great hotel, the Hilton Hotel, and I got my room, and it was right on a really busy street called Wireless Road in Bangkok. And you could hear every single tuk-tuk and car and motorcycle, and they don't have anywhere near, I mean, they basically make the motorcycles without mufflers there. You cannot imagine how loud this stuff, it's literally ear-shattering. And I got into my room, and it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and it was so loud and an expensive, beautiful hotel, and I thought, I'm not going to fall asleep in this place for 4 weeks. So I went downstairs to the manager of the hotel, and I said, listen, they said, oh, sir, we cannot put every, I said, yes, but I'm with the movie. And they said, oh, but sir, we cannot put every movie employee in the quieter part of the hotel. We would have no, I said, no, you don't understand. You don't understand. I'm the writer. And I said, the director is over on that quiet side, and I need to be over on that quiet side. In case he needs something from me, I need to be there. And what they did was, I just wanted to be on the same side of the hotel as those people. I don't know how they did this, but they put me in the next room. So every time Barry would need something, he'd like knock on the wall. I'd hear like a, so I was there for like, you know, he had like a rewrite idea any time of day or night. I would be so close there, but it actually turned out to be a good thing because I had questions of my own, and I knocked on his door or his wall also, and but I was, you know, I kind of I tried to get a quiet room, and I used him as a kind of, you know, I used him as an excuse for them to put me over there, and they really put me over there. I didn't really want to be next door to him, you know.
Now, here's the weather. We're going to go right to Roosevelt E. Roosevelt. Roosevelt, how's it going? Adrian, I'm with somebody. Don't ever come here and bother me right now. Well, thanks, Roosevelt. Can't you give us a little weather? Not now, man. I'm on the balcony. I'm trying to score. Back off. Well, what's the weather like? You got a window? Open it. Thank you, Roosevelt. We'll have to go to someone else for the weather, I guess.
It must be the hottest place on earth. It had to be. It was at least 100. It was literally 121 degrees, something like that. Maybe 124.
It was hot. It was hot. Very hot.
And that humidity, that if you walk out of an air-conditioned building, you know, your glasses just fog up immediately.
And by the way, it really, the weather really helps the look of the movie. The movie looks like it's hot, and it looks like everybody's always sweating, and consequently uncomfortable, and they're, you know, not everything was air conditioned, so there are fans blowing throughout, and it's just part of the overall verisimilitude of the movie. But it was, at times, it was blisteringly hot. But you know, you can get through it.
I fainted the first day. It was like 6 o'clock in the morning. It was already 100.
You couldn't imagine it. You didn't even believe it. When it was happening, you think by a certain age, you know your body. You've grown up in New York. You've been in heat waves. All of a sudden, you're in Bangkok, and you're sweating in places you've never sweated before. You know, wait, this never opened up here and did this. That's an impossibility. You can't physically sweat there. And you know, behind the ear, I'd never sweat. It was incredible. But in a strange way, you did get used to it.
First day I show up there, I was unaware of the sun in Thailand, and I arrived there, and everybody's hanging out at the pool. So I go to the pool, and I notice a girl's laying there topless. So naturally, I go next to her. And I'm there for about an hour or two talking to her, and not thinking anything of it. And I had never experienced sunburn like that in my life. And in fact, the first week I have to call my doctor to get, you know, to say, what do I put on this? I mean, I wound up with first-degree burns, and I am just beet red. I mean, and there was nothing as painful as getting into wardrobe, army wardrobe, and putting this stuff on. And I remember putting the boots on, and the pain that I was in for about the first week was brought on by myself totally, but quite excruciating.
And also, every now and then a rain would come. It would be like a monsoon. You'd be in the back of one of those tuk-tuks, and it would just open up, and you just laugh.
I loved it. I love the people over there. And there's something extremely intoxicating about it in a way, you know? When you go upriver on those little boats, and I forgot the name of them now, and you just see the land and the way it is. I mean, there's something really fascinating. Fascinating.
Goodbye, Vietnam!
When people say to me, well, talk a little bit about your movies. What movie are you proudest of? Well, you don't have a choice. You have to say you're proudest of Godfather, too. You have to be. Everybody else in the world is, and I'm not blind, and it's probably the film that will last the most out of any film I've ever been in. But the film that I had the best time on, the film that I enjoyed going to work on the most every single day was Good Morning Vietnam.
The movie holds up very, very well, and that's a tribute to Barry and the structure and the characters and Robin.
You know, we were making this movie. We had very little feedback. We were making it for the Walt Disney Company, but by the time that our film got to them and they could see what we're doing, it was probably a week later. So we never really had anybody able to tell us, that's working, that's not working, go do this, go do that, or whatever else. So we were sort of just relying on our own instincts.
All right, I'm history. I'm out of here. I got the lucky ticket home, baby.
It was one of those experiences you'll never forget.